program may be pre-recorded.
The following program is paid for by the Lone Star RIA. Welcome to the Massive Passive Show, where you'll hear serious discussions about everything real estate investors encounter building their portfolios. Many radio shows and podcasts talk about real estate investing, but the host of the Massive Passive Show actually do it. Sit back and relax and learn about becoming a massive passive deal maker.
Good morning and welcome to the Massive Passive Show, brought to you by the Lone Star RIA. This is James Haney, one of your hosts, and as usual, we have a very exciting show today. But before we get into that, I want you to remember that our website is lonestarria.net. That's lonestarreia.net, and that's where you can find all of our information, our contact information, our upcoming events. And we have, speaking of upcoming events, we have Ron LeGrand, the legendary Ron LeGrand is coming to Houston next month. So definitely check that out. And we look forward to seeing you there. We'll have breakfast tacos, we'll have networking, and it'll just be a very fun, exciting day. We even have a bonus session in the afternoon. So refer to lonestarreia.net. That's lonestarreia.net. For that information on that, as well as other things. We have Ray Sasha that's here as well. We have a special guest. Andy is going to be joining us here in a minute. And we also have another special guest, one of our vendors, Tom Stinson with Goosehead Insurance. So let's go ahead and bring everybody in, Ray and Tom, and let's go ahead and get started on this wonderful show today. How are you guys doing?
Awesome. Yeah, and this is Ray. I'm doing wonderful, and then also we're going to have Andy Teasley come in a little bit and talk about some fun real estate stuff.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we like to do in the beginning of our show is, we always talk about team building and having key people on your team. And one of those key people you need is somebody like Tom with Goosehead Insurance to protect your investment properties. And so I'm gonna hand it over to Tom and let him talk about his services and what he can do. And of course, we'll ask him some questions because this is a very important time to insure your properties. For one, a lot of people forget that we are in hurricane season right now. But regardless if we are or not, you still need to have the right policy and be able to know and understand your coverage on that. So Tom, you want to go ahead and take over?
Sure. This is Tom Stinson. I've been an insurance agent in Houston for about a decade and worked with, my God, countless number of investors. And when people are insuring a property, most of the time they don't want my product. They've got a gun to their head that says, buy this insurance or else. And the requirements, so there's a couple of distinctions to be made for investors. Some investors are going to that is a licensed mortgage lender. And that lender is somebody from one of the big shops, Prime Lending, I don't know, name one of those big guys, Envoy Mortgage, right? Those lenders are going to require Fannie and Freddie underwritten loans. They accept replacement costs, et cetera. But the biggest problem I get is when people bring me deals from private lenders or from hard money lenders, and the requirements make it obvious and clear that those lenders don't understand what an insurance policy is and what it covers. Most investors will be surprised to learn that vacancy is a problem in insurance policies. I don't know why they'd be surprised at that, but they are. And there's surprises around every corner. So most of the time, my job is just to help get a deal done. Investors also don't get that the insurance business doesn't exist to serve its customers. It exists to serve the big financial institutions. So the insurance business client is really the mortgage companies and the finance companies that are behind the houses and the cars.
Tom, this is Ray. You speak just like an investor that's turned into an insurance guy.
A lot of truth to that. I mean, and the majority of calls that I get from investors, just like from retail clients, I insure a lot of homes, people buying property. is small claims. They'll call me and say, well, somebody stole the appliances out of the place. Oh, that's terrible. Well, we need to file a claim. No, we don't. It's not even going to be enough to match the deductible. So many people are constantly calling me about $5,000 or $10,000 claims. Let me tell you, if you're an investor and you don't have $5,000 or $10,000 to fix the homes that you're working on, I think you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it really, we have to make the lenders happy. But in 40 years of buying houses, I've turned in one claim, and it was because the house burned down.
Was it a total loss? That's a rare one.
Yeah, the lot was still salvageable, but that was it.
Wow. Yeah, it's a funny thing, but the investors it's like people have a notion of what insurance is and what it does. I'm telling you, half of them, when I tell them it doesn't cover flood, they just look dumbfounded. And I'm like, don't you guys own homes? I don't get it. I mean, there's no flood insurance that comes with, and a landlord's policy is pretty similar to a homeowner's policy until you dumb it down.
Yeah, James brought up it's hurricane season, and some people might be surprised that. Tell people what happens when a hurricane enters the Gulf.
Yeah, so all of the companies go on an immediate hold, and you're not able to bind any policies. So that means if you've got a real estate closing set up and you haven't bound that policy, you're not going to be able to bind it, and that's going to delay your closings. Yeah, that's assuming closings are even open, while it's crazy anyway. But there's usually a 3 or 4 day run up before a hurricane actually hits. So there's this last minute mad scramble, and I end up binding policies with carriers who are still taking bindings up to the last minute for far worse prices than what the guys were getting before.
Well, and I'm your typical investor that waits 7 minutes before closing to realize I don't have insurance. So how do you help people like me?
So once you get a deal started, it's very easy to just make a policy. And then I send that policy to the title company. And now there are no changes, and it's a bound real deal. Now, if it doesn't close, you never pay for it. Who cares?
Right, exactly.
No. But if you don't set that up in the first place, and if you're waiting until the day before closing, thinking that you have to give me a credit card, I just send an invoice to the title company. If you make it the title, great. You paid for an insurance policy. If you don't, we never have to worry about it.
So let's just talk about the type of policies that that investors should be thinking about having.
So investors hear the term builder's risk, and they have no idea what that means. But let me help you out. You'll know if you're a builder. You're going to have an awful lot of building projects, and you've got a name in there that says you're a builder. But if you're just a regular investor, you need what's called a landlord's policy. There's two real flavors, the DP1 and the DP3. Those are form names from the state of Texas. These are variations of replacement cost and actual cash value. I've got investors who buy policies with cash, with all the arguments that you have about what you should finance or how much your cash you should use. It's not relevant to me. And they'll buy a $300,000 property and they want me to insure it for $100,000. I mean, that's fine. They have nobody forcing them to do anything, but that $100,000 is not going to pay replacement cost. They've got to insure at 80% of the replacement value of the building that they're buying. And then they have this problem about they want to insure it for its after repair value, which I could do. But now if you have a total loss, they're going to pay what the replacement cost was actually worth at the time the house was destroyed. So it doesn't make sense to pay for $350,000 of insurance when you're only going to have that towards the end of the policy, if it's a 6-month policy or if it's a 1-year policy,
right.
When you've got half that for the time.
Have you actually seen people get into a co-insurance situation?
Absolutely. Where they get claims paid, they'll have a $20,000 loss and they'll get paid $5,000. And they're standing around looking. And I said, here's a document that I had you sign that explained that it's going to pay out actual cash value. Sometimes some people are just thick. I don't know. You can't get through to them.
Well, what we need to do is make sure we have you come to our meetings and go through this like in a 30-minute tip or whatever. But I think the best thing for people to do is just reach out to you if they don't understand this, and be ready, so that when you get that property, you're ready to go and you can get it bound and you get the right kind of coverage off, from the start.
Absolutely. And then the hard money lenders, you got to let me fight with them. They come and they'll force me to do $140,000 on some 800 square foot property where the replacement cost might be $100,000. And you're paying premium on 40,000 that you'll never see. If the thing burns to the ground, they're gonna pay you $100,000. Well, so I can insure something for $1 million, and the insurance companies will take your money, but if it burns to the ground, they're gonna pay what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you for joining us today, and I hopefully we didn't confuse people. It's actually pretty easy just to pick up the phone. So how do people get a hold of you, and if they have questions, ask you questions?
Yeah, so the easiest way, my office is 281-712-7272. We're always answering the phone live. It forwards to my cell phone on weekends. Most of my clients are real estate agents or lenders. Those guys work the weekends. Call me whenever you have a question, whenever you need something.
And you really work, specialize with investors and realtors, and you'll do windstorm and flood and various hazard insurance policies.
The whole smear. I even do boats and motorcycles and silly toys.
Okay.
You can also catch Tom's information at LoneStarREIA.net. That's LoneStarREIA.net. And his information is there. You'll just look for the vendor section. And then also, Tom is going to be speaking at our landlord focus group on Tuesday, June 28th. And that information is also on our website, but we're going to be at Damaris Barbecue over off of 610. So he'll be the speaker there, and also believe he's going to be at our next meeting when Ron LeGrand is here on July 9th. So plenty of opportunity. And Tom, one last time, give that phone number one more time before you go.
So it's 281-712-7272.
And James, since you're buying the barbecue, I definitely will be at that meeting.
I'm out of town that day. So yeah, we look forward to seeing you there, Tom. And thanks for everything you do for us and investors and the REIA.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so let's jump into some really good, fun investing stuff. In fact, Ray, you are actually at Peter Fortunato's class, and because he does it every so often. And Peter was actually our keynote speaker, and he did an afternoon session at our meeting last month. So talk about. And this is your second or third time hearing Peter this year, correct?
Yeah, because as I do more and more stuff, I realize I'm leaving a lot of boxes unchecked and leaving a lot of loose ends around. So it's, yeah, and plus I have a little bit more discretionary time, and I just like hanging out with the people that go to Peter's events. In fact, we've got Andy Teasley here with us. And I basically recruited him because he has a really pretty interesting business that he's in as a real estate investor. And so this is my opportunity to just drill him with questions and really get a good understanding. And of course, I'm using the radio show as an excuse to do that. But so welcome, Andy.
I have a hard time claiming it's a business as little as I work. Quite frankly, I think I just hang out and have a good time.
Yeah.
And I promised to be here with Peter. He routinely teaches in June, and I will always be at this class, and he teaches his paper course in December. And if you guys all want to put it in your calendars right now, you can. It's always the first weekend in December, unless there's a one in it, because if there's a one in it, half of his friends won't come. Because they're out collecting rent, because they're old school guys.
Because they're collecting rent on the first of the month.
That's right. So, yeah, it's nice to be here.
Well, it's really scary when you get the book and I'm talking, so I'm not really paying attention. And they hand me the book, and it's about the weight of an old Yellow Pages was, And then I open it up and I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to do this in a weekend?
It's a challenge. I learned, when I come to a Peter class, I print out T-shirts that have libertarian sayings on them. And one of the main reasons I do that is I like a full bag because it's easier to fly with.
Right.
It's all loose and floppy. It's a pain. And by bringing the T-shirts and selling them at his class, then I have space for the book.
Well, I think the books are going to be heavier than the T-shirts this year.
They are, but it's about the same volume if I sell enough.
What are some of the slogans on these T-shirts? I see there.
Well, try capitalism and make Orwell fiction again is one that.
Yeah. Is that
That's
your
my shirt?
Oh, several people are wearing that.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. And I've got one on it that says legalize freedom on the front, and the back says make Ayn Rand fiction again.
Yeah.
I had somebody ask me how I can wear those shirts in California.
Do you wear them there?
I absolutely do.
So Andy, as we talked about a little while ago, Peter was actually our speaker last month, and I had the privilege of being his chauffeur while he was here in town. And when I picked him up from the airport, he was wearing a shirt that said "Legalize Freedom." So was that one of your shirts that he got from you before?
Odds are good. He's the inspiration for my T-shirts as well. I have to have a shirt pocket because I have the cell phones there and the glasses, the readers now that I'm getting older there. And he'll have one of those shirts that he orders off the internet. And I like the shirt, but you can't get them with a pocket. So what I've learned is I have to get a dozen of shirts with pockets in my size.
Right.
Then I get 6 dozen assorted shirts for my friends and get them all silk screened. So that's how come I got to be the T-shirt guy, because I like to have my own. So yeah, Pete Sophomore wore one of my shirts.
There was one that the women were wearing, and I can't remember what it said. Vina Jones was wearing it.
Was it a red one or what?
I can't remember, but it had a really neat saying on it, and I can't remember what the saying was.
There's the one that says Future Natos.
Yeah, Future Natos.
Like that's the one that has Rosie the Riveter on it.
Right. Okay.
And yeah. Oh no, that's Fortune cookie. Fortunato cookies is Rosie the Riveter, and then Future Natos is the red one with the tie.
Yeah. So
the iconic 1969 tie.
Peter Fortunato is almost like a cult figure. I mean, he truly is, because he's not in the mainstream, but all the heavy hitters are somehow there. He's like light for the moths. He just draws them to him, and then you never know who you're sitting next to in one of these meetings. And oftentimes, that's worth the meeting right there, just the networking.
The crowd at his classes are just phenomenal. They really are. And there's old guys, and he has an interesting life.
Yeah.
I really look forward to getting to that point.
Well, so do you want to just jump into some of the things that Andy's doing and some of the things maybe we're doing with Peter and stuff like that, or the kind of stuff Peter does, James, or do you have a rigid agenda?
No, let's go in and talk a little bit about time value money and the financial calculator stuff, because that stuff is pretty interesting and it's pretty important, and it can go over quite a few people's heads, but once you hear it several times, then hopefully it should start to sink in. But it is a very important topic, so let's go ahead and jump into those.
So let me start off with a why. For 25 years of my investing career, I did not know the financial calculator existed. And I got by really well on memorizing that a 6% loan on a 30-year AM on a $100,000 house is going to cost me right about $600 a month. And I knew that if I used the rule of 72, I could figure out how quickly I might double my investment.
So you take this 6, divide that into 72, and 12 years later, you've doubled your money.
Right. So then I got by with that. And the analogy I like to use with people is I want you to picture the typical Scooby-Doo haunted house where the windows are boarded up and there's sheets over the furniture and cobwebs. And you can find your way around that house just barely if you have a candle. And that's doing real estate investing or any kind of investing and not understanding the financial calculator. if you understand the financial calculator, that's finding your way through that same Scooby-Doo house, but having one of those 6-cell police officer flashlights with the LED bulb that makes the whole house look like daylight, right? So if you understand, that's the reason to grind through. It's not easy to learn how to run the financial calculator. It takes a good solid commitment, and most people, at least 1 8-hour class, just doing examples and working through it. And then you have the basics, and you can go forward from there and apply the tool and do the calculations and learn how to structure things. And then you can tweak your structure so that you make additional profit anytime you do a deal.
And I want to cut in there. I want to translate for what he's saying. It's like, we do a bus tour, and in one day you go from zero to knowing how to estimate repairs in one day. And it's the same with the financial calculator. It's a little difficult, but it's you start understanding it as the day goes on, and by the end of the day, your life will never be the same. You will never be in the dark ever again.
Well, that's it. You get it loaded on nowadays it's on the smartphone app, and
right,
and it's there, and you pull it out of your pocket and you use it 5 or 6 times a day. When it's our friend Clyde Wilson calls it a time machine.
Yeah,
because you can use that tool and you can predict where you'll be in the future.
Yeah, and you can, if you don't like where that calculator, what it's predicting, you can change the variables.
That's right. And you can say that this isn't going to work. If I keep investing in these 3% mutual funds and putting them into a 401k or an IRA plan where the custodian charges an obscene fee,
right? Then
when I get to be ready to retire when I'm 70 years old, I'm not going to have enough money. I'm going to be your typical person that has, $60,000 in their IRA or solo or 401k plan. And you can say, that's not going to work for me. I enjoy groceries better than that. And I really don't like the taste of cat food. So,
and you're saying that because there's a lot of people that get to that age and they eat cat food. They eat cat food for survival.
I have people call me every day because I do a lot of business in senior community.
Right.
And they're getting by on Social Security, maybe some widow's benefits, and their entire monthly budget is $2,000 in Southern California. And I tell them, I don't have anything I can rent to you because the cheapest thing I have to put somebody in to live would take over half of their monthly income. Right. And that
doesn't count utilities, it doesn't count food, it doesn't count anything. I mean, so there's no money. They can't survive.
Yeah. So it's very important to me. I love catching the youngsters, and I do a lot of networking at real estate meetings. And when I find somebody in their 20s, I ask them, I say, if you could put $500 a month away, you got 50 years to go because you're in your 20s, you're going to work till you're 70 something. I mean, that's the new 50. And if you put $500 a month away into your IRA and you keep it consistently invested at 15%, how much does that grow up to? And the answer is that's $69 million. And that's just by putting $17 a day away, but keeping it invested at 15%.
Right.
And now that's a world of difference than keeping it invested at 3 minus fees, which doesn't keep up with inflation. But then the next step is to use the calculator and show them what it costs them to wait 1 year to start. So if instead of 50 years, they only have 49 years to go, they will find they will be $10 million poorer by just delaying fully funding their retirement account by 1 year.
Andy, the other thing I like, and maybe you can mention what the 5 variables on the financial calculator, because we're talking about predicting the future. And you not only can predict the future, you control and shape the future if you know what the variables that you're looking at. And so maybe we need to, for example, you said earn 15% yield. Well, it's not easy to earn 15% yield unless you start working at it. But if you don't start working on it, it's never going to happen. So you have to know what to work for, right? You can't just sit around for 30 years and say, well, maybe I can do that. Once we set the problem out there, then we're going to figure out how to solve it.
Right. You're not going to make 15% by buying stocks and trade.
Right. Right.
They don't make that kind of return. But if you learn a skill of some sort, if you learn how to do investing in tax lien certificates, I mean, Texas has a spectacular interest rate on tax lien
25% simple interest.
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah, it's great. And you do some of that, and that gets you over that 15% pretty quickly.
Right.
If you learn how to buy something cheap and sell it for at least twice what you paid for it, carry the paper on it, you can make 50%.
To me, when I learned the financial calculator, it was like, okay, so if I can get this yield, then I can be at this point somewhere in the future. So what skill set do I have to learn to get that yield? And then my whole life became that focus.
Good. That's what you set a goal, because you can use the financial calculator as a tool.
Right.
And that tool will tell you how much do you need to put away every month, how much do you need to earn on what you put away every year. And like, you can put all those variables into the computer, and you can say, well, what if I get lazy and only make 6%? What's that going to do to me when I'm 50 years?
Right.
And the time machine, the financial calculator, lets you tweak the variables, and that will teach you where you really need to go to get where you want to be.
Your analogy with Scooby-Doo and the dark boarded up windows and the mansion, and it being a flashlight, it exposes what you need to do and where you need to go, and really maybe how to get there.
Yeah. I mean, it's there gets to be a point. You and I both know people who are investors. They're house junkies, and they own too many houses.
Right.
And it's really easy, because when you start getting addicted to buying houses, it's really easy to get too many of the darn things. And that can be that's an unnecessary thing to do. You need to figure out how many you need to be comfortable to be able to come take classes like this and travel and take the wife to Europe once in a while.
So what you're talking about is your bandwidth, right? You get too many of these things, it's taking up all your time.
Then you don't have any life.
And you need to polish that up, right? You need to maybe reduce your bandwidth, get the properties that will have the kind of yields that you want and give you the results, and not make you work your butt off.
Right. I mean, when I started out, I was buying any junk I could buy and making a cash flow. And that was houses that were in the wrong part of town. That was houses that had common walls. I had a sixplex for a while. And those tenants talk to each other, and they gripe. And if you want to
conspire too,
they do. I mean, I'm in California. I've been reading articles about tenants unions that have decided that an entire apartment building in San Francisco doesn't have to pay rent because they don't like to. And the government, our courts are shut down. You can't do anything to get rid of them, and they don't understand why the building's just getting boarded up, and they're out of luck.
Right.
Because they don't get it. And I've learned as I've gone forward, now you couldn't gift me a duplex. I do not want to own a house that has common walls. I don't want tenants that know each other.
Right.
I want single family residences, and I like good middle of the market value, single family.
That early on, I ran across Jack Miller, and a lot of the people here are Millerites, and he really drove that home, about having houses, because people that live in these houses are our partners, and we're not their babysitters. And if you have common walls, you end up being their babysitters.
That's right. And when the sewer gets stopped up in a single family house, who stopped the sewer up?
Exactly.
It wasn't the neighbors.
Well, it wasn't a person on the other side of a common wall.
Right. And so when a single family house has a stopped up drain, you tell your tenants, well, call a rotor man out, and he will root your drain. And
don't call me.
Don't call me. I don't own one of those machines, and I don't know how to use it.
Exactly.
But when it's a duplex, it's never their kid that flushed the stuffed animal. And so they're you learn as you mature in the industry, and you take a lot of training, the kind of deals that are easier. And unless you just are addicted to working hard, you want to find those easy deals with the good yields.
And I do think we need to work hard, like when we're acquiring and we're growing, but we have to be smart. And James said, well, Ray, this is like your third time, because Peter's talking about the things that I have to fix. He's talking about the things like, Ray, don't work so hard, work smarter, figure out how to get the right assets, hold the right assets. We're doing, I don't think I told you, but we're doing 2 1031 exchanges right now because I see these 2 properties over here are taking too much of my bandwidth. So we're changing, and we're changing from something that is a lot of work and a lot of bandwidth to something that's no bandwidth and no work. And it's people like Peter and people like you hanging around with people and just brainstorming on this stuff.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy who was saying he was going to start doing a lot more house flipping.
Right.
Because he's, and I started talking, he said, oh yeah, I got lucky.
Did you break out in hives when he started talking?
Oh, it was hard not to just jump right on it. But he starts talking about his first deal that was a 6-plex he bought in 1981. And I said, well, what were the rents in 1981? And he said they were getting $275 a unit. And I said, well, how much are you making off that house today? And he said, well, nothing. I wanted a lump of cash. And where's the cash today? He didn't know. And I said, what do you think that building is renting for today? He said, I bet it's getting $2,500 a unit. That's $15,000 a month in gross income.
Forever.
And I bet he didn't pay $30,000 for that 6-plex in 1981.
Right.
How much better off would he have been if he had just kept that one 6-plex, done his job, done nothing else until he retired, and he would have $7,500 in his pocket every month to supplement his income. So if you
give away so much, I calculated once with wholesalers. I whipped out the financial calculator. In fact, you do a newsletter, and I would like for you to maybe verify my math on this because you'll probably get it right. But we looked at what the future value, and we worked backwards to the present value of holding an asset versus flipping it on a wholesale. And half the world out there is wholesaling these properties. And with my math, we came out to you make 7 to 10 times more holding on to a property than you do wholesaling.
Well, the problem with wholesaling is you're doing a highly taxed activity.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to find a good deal on a house, you have the most important skill in our industry. And I really feel sorry for these people that see.
You just defined a wholesaler.
Yeah, but they don't. That's just a choice.
Right.
If they're really good at finding houses, they don't have to give them away for chump change.
Right.
If you're really good at finding houses, but you don't want to learn how to manage, or you don't have any credit, or you don't have the skill set to fix up a bombed down house, if you're active in your local RIA, all of those skills, all those other people are available to you. And if you get one that's a good one, you would be 100 times better off if you stood up during haves and wants at your local RIA and said, I've got this 3-bedroom, 2-bath house under contract. It's over here in a nice part of town. I got a smoking hot deal on it. I need somebody that can fund this deal, that knows how to do the rehab. And then when it's done, we'll decide if we're going to sell it or if we're going to keep it forever.
Right.
And I'm willing to, I'll provide the house. I got it under contract. I want 40% of the net, and I want to watch you do it so I can learn those skill sets that I don't have today. And I tell everybody.
Well, wait, is that all they're going to ask for? 40% of the net, some lessons on the skill set that I don't have. What about future?
Well, I said, whatever. I mean, I want 40% of the deal.
From then on.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, but today you're not getting a lump of cash that you get if you wholesale, right?
Right.
But instead, you've got wealth. And everybody thinks they want to come into this industry to develop wealth. I don't want another job.
No.
And then there's silly people in our society that think having cash is a good thing.
Yeah.
But our friend Peter has a great analogy. If you want to learn the real world, what cash really is, in the morning, before you go to work, open your freezer up, take an ice cube out, put it in your pocket, and go about your day. And at the end of the day, when you come home, reach in your pocket and take out the ice cube. And you will understand What happens with cash? It's just like that ice cube in your pocket. If you have cash, it melts.
Right.
It melts because the government steals from us with inflation.
Yeah.
It melts because it's handy and that latte looks really tasty. And gee, I can have a $20 lunch instead of a $5 lunch. And gee, that's a nice shiny car. Maybe I should get a new shiny car.
Peter basically used the word seed corn this morning. I hadn't heard anybody say that since Jimmy, but it's like, that is your seed corn. You're taking that money and you're putting it in your pocket, and it's melting throughout the day. And at the end of the day, there's nothing there.
Yeah. How much better off if you take that one seed of corn and you put it in the ground? And I've never seen a corn stalk that didn't have at least one ear of corn.
Okay.
And if you have 100 seeds on
Right.
that one ear of corn,
Right.
you could enjoy one nice ear of corn and have a meal or a part of a meal. Or you can take those 100 seeds and you can plant them the next year.
Right.
And those 100 seeds will each make another 100 seeds. You have 10,000 seeds then. And if you just take half of that, harvest half of that and enjoy it, have a nice,
Right. Right.
corn and ribs barbecue with the family, but take those 5,000 seeds and plant them. Now you've got 500,000 ears of corn. And in the third year, you got more corn than your family could ever eat.
And the thing is, cash is like such an inefficient way to do things. And so we don't want to be touching cash any more than necessary. We want to figure out how to get that seed and grow that and nurture that and harvest that.
See, and all my students think I'm nuts because I'm constantly getting after them. Because whenever one of my retirement accounts, and I take care of between my personal accounts, the wife's accounts, family accounts, I have 5 retirement accounts, and my job for the family is to make those grow.
Right.
And I have a list, and I have students that mostly flip mobile homes and to create notes, and I lend them money on their notes, and I get really annoyed when there's $5,000 sitting idle in one of those retirement accounts. I am annoyed.
Right.
I want every dollar out of those accounts. I don't want any money.
So in your eyes, that dollar sitting in that account is that ice cube just slowly melting away.
Yeah.
So Andy, I want to ask you to do we talked a little bit about the financial calculator and how that's like the spotlight that blazes your trail, because it really tells you how to go and where to go. I want, if you can, give us an example of how you would use a financial calculator and say, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but just some sort of little deal. And think about that for a second. And while you're thinking about that, James, we're going to talk Andy into coming and maybe doing a 2-day class either in Houston or San Antonio. And I would love to have him spend like a day, like on a financial calculator. You'll do that. And then the next day, working through real life examples. Yeah, because if you don't know how to use a financial calculator and putting deals together, you're going to have to take our word that it makes a big difference. Because when I started, I got some books out there from guys that I respected, and I walked through their case studies just like they were real deals. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't the same person anymore, because now I knew how to solve problems and still accomplish what would work for me in the long run. So, Andy, give us, first of all, if we bribe you, can you come to Houston and spend a couple of days with our group?
Actually, I promised to buy a parcel in Cisco, so I've got to drive up there anyhow.
Okay.
I might as well, right off the trip. So, Jimmy Napier was a great friend and an amazing educator.
He was my number one mentor.
And he was really good negotiator. I mean,
Right.
I don't know anyone that you talk about who would you fear negotiating against? And I think, bar none, everybody would say Jimmy.
And the problem with Jimmy is you'd like it. You'd like him just beating you up just because of his style.
So he has this little book that invested debt, and everybody said, you got to read Jimmy's book. It's a great book. And I didn't know how to run a financial calculator.
Right.
So I read Jimmy's book, and I said, oh, it's okay. It was not an exciting book to me. Then after I took the financial calculator class, I read it again. And when I understood what he was doing with those calculations and chopping the notes up and partials, and
Right.
I went, wow, this is a great book. So,
And I think what else happens is when you get in, we really are troubleshooters. We get paid when we solve problems, and if we're buying properties, we're solving problems. What you don't realize is when you go through this, you have those answers in your head. You just don't have the problem, and then the problem presents itself, and all of a sudden these answers come out. You don't even know where they come from, but now you're like, okay, I think we should do a split wrap. And then you think, well, I've never done a split wrap before. So give me, can you think of something maybe like this? And it's hard without the calculator to really see the benefits of it.
It's hard to do it without them saying what it. But so let's say you have a house that you'd like to sell, and you want to maximize how much you can sell that house for. And you're trying to figure out what the price should be. If you instead start with what can your buyer afford on a monthly basis, and you figure out that number, then you take out your calculator and you figure out what interest rate that you think you can charge, and you figure out what loan term you're willing to have your money working, and you can put all those factors in, and that calculator will tell you how much you should sell the house for.
Right.
And then if you're going to decide to buy a house to sell, you can calculate how much is the maximum you can pay for the house.
Right.
So, for example, if you had a mobile home in a park and the park rent was $500 and the going price for an apartment in that neighborhood, or the equivalent apartment, was $950. So my formula is I take the $950 and I subtract the $500 space rent.
Are you comparing that to like an apartment in the area?
Yeah,
okay.
A neighborhood apartment, same quality apartment, same quality mobile home.
Gotcha.
I would take that $950 and I would subtract the space rent. That would give me $450. And then to make it really juicy for our buyers, I take another $100 off, and that gives me a $350 monthly payment.
Right.
Now, if I take that $350 monthly payment and I put 9% interest on it, and I decide I want it out there for 85 months, then that would tell me that I could sell that mobile home for $22,000.
So that's your present value of that income stream.
That's right.
Okay.
So if I can buy that mobile home for 10, get a $3,000 down payment, I end up with only $7,000 left in that note. So now instead of getting 9% on my money, my calculator will tell me I'm getting 53% on my money.
Right. Right.
That's a pretty good return when you think about it.
And now you're thinking like the guy that's operating that flashlight, because now you're structuring the deal to give you that yield. Because we know that with the rule of 72, if we divide 12 into 72, your money doubles in 6 years. If you divide 53 into 72,
it doubles every year and a half.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, a lot of people, their brain shuts down when you hear numbers.
Yeah.
And what really makes it, in a class like Andy teaches, what really makes it good is that you go through the calculator and you literally just have to hit the buttons through 10 or 15 deals before you feel comfortable with it. There's just no other way, but you got to do it. Do the time, okay, and do that. Then you throw examples of like, how would we put this together? What would you do? How would you change it? How can we add more to it? How can we subtract less? And you don't have to be a master at this on day one. You just have to know that it will grow with you.
well, I mean, I'm one of the guys that always sits in the back room of the class because I'm a slow learner. So
Yeah.
I keep taking these classes over and over again. And every time I take a class, I always have a great takeaway.
You know, and the thing is, the first time I went to Jack Miller and Peter Fortunato, it was all about vocabulary. I didn't understand the words. They were using as a different language. And then about the third or fourth time, I went from understanding vocabulary to understanding strategies. And then, so I'd kind of get the strategy and say, oh, I want that strategy. You know, I just want to put it in my head somewhere. And then that 3 or 4 of the strategy things, and that, by the way, that never ends. And then, but then it was like, well, how do you position yourself? How do you get in these opportunities? How do you get in these conversations? And then, so that's like the third level. There may be a fourth or fifth level, but you just got to go. You got to show up. You got to be around people doing what you want to do, and you'll have a fun and charmed life.
I think so. And I really enjoy what I do. I like it when I'm able to save somebody's house.
Yeah.
I just did a deal for a guy who was 10 days away from losing his house. He was going to lose it for tax sale, and he had a $15,000 tax bill. And I was able to solve that problem. I bought an option. I have the right to buy his house in 5 years for another $50,000. It's worth $125,000.
Right.
And because I know how to run my financial calculator, I knew that if I could get $200 a month return on my $15,000, that's pretty good return on my money. So I gave him the right to extend that 5 years by sending me $200. Every time he sends me $200, he gets another month.
Right.
So he can kick the can forever. And if I know that I get $2,400 a month on $15,000, I could calculate it, but we're on the radio, so you can't see it. Just know that's good enough. It's like 24%.
Right.
So it's another way to structure things. And it's nice to be able to save the guy's house.
You know, and I know, like, if you're listening on the radio, it's like, oh my God, I don't even know what they said. If you go through this 10 or 15 times, it gets to be simple. It's like driving a car. Imagine the first time you ever drove a car. It's overwhelming. You think you're going to kill yourself, but you just got to get in there and practice it. And it's not as hard as it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, if you're right, the car's a great analogy. You think about nowadays, you drive in a car, you got a soda in your hand, you got a burger, you got the map thing on your cell phone, the phone rings. Yeah.
And then you're watching the road, maybe.
Yeah. And we just don't get a second thought.
I wanted to chime in here. We got about five and a half minutes left before the end of the show. But I did want to encourage the people that are listening, go to LoneStarREIA.net. That's LoneStarREIA.net, and look us up on YouTube. If you go to that website I just gave you, there's going to be a link that you can check us out on YouTube, and you can find this video. Go back and listen to this. Yes, it's different than being in person, which we are going to work on bringing that to you guys. But go back and listen. There's a lot of great information in this show. A couple of things that came to mind when we were talking about earlier, way back in the beginning of the show, about putting aside a certain amount of money for a certain amount of years. That is just mind-blowing how it compounds and how you can build your wealth. And then another thing is, a few minutes ago, Andy, when you first started talking about how to figure out a price to sell a property, if you're going to create a note or create paper with it, is to focus on what your buyer can afford. That is gold right there. If you think about it, that's exactly what, when you go to buy a car the traditional way, that's exactly what they do. They focus on what your payment is. They work out the term, they work out the down payment, they work around the interest rate, they work all of that around what you can afford each month. And I just thought that was mind-blowing how that also ties into real estate as well.
James, before Andy says anything, I just want to say I'm pretty proud of you for picking up on that, because that is probably the most powerful thing he said. Is he basically solves the person's problem and gives them what they need.
Yeah, that's really what we do. We solve problems for people that need relief from the house.
Right.
And then we provide somebody with a nice, safe place to live. That's my favorite thing, is I'm able to solve someone's problem and I'm able to give somebody a nice house to live.
Yeah.
And they turn around and work 10 hours a week so they can pay my bills.
Right. It's wonderful. And I think that's why, I guess, after all these years, I stay involved in the REIA, because you never know who you're sitting next to in life, and you need to reach out to the people around you. And I just love the energy that you get in these REIA meetings, because you have your partners, you have your JVs out there, you have your people who are happy to do the things that maybe you don't want to do. And then you bring strengths, all of us bring strengths to the table. So is there anything you want to say, Andy? Like, first of all,
are you guys doing live? You're doing live REIAs, right?
Yeah, okay. We have live REIAs.
I have something that I hope that all the newbies pay attention to. if you're at a RIA meeting, I want you to look at the crowd that's there. And I want you to find the guy that's got gray hair and wrinkles, and he's dressed comfortably. He's probably wearing a t-shirt, and he's probably got blue jeans or khaki shorts and comfortable shoes. And you'll notice that the guys that run the RIA defer to him a little bit.
Right.
And you will be talking to the richest man in the room. And if you go to that man and you say, "Hi, my name is, and I want to grow up to be you. What should I be doing right now?" And I don't know any of those guys that won't sit down and talk to that newbie and say, "Here's what you should be doing today."
Yeah.
And too many new people come to a RIA and they're fawning over the property manager who has to wear a suit to impress everybody.
Right.
Drives a leased car.
They're talking to the wrong person.
And doesn't have a pit to hiss.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been great.
Is there any way people can subscribe to your newsletter?
Absolutely.
So
shoot me an email. It's it's Andy the Christmas Guy at yahoo.com.
And that's another story. Andy the Christmas Guy at yahoo.com.
Because I'm old.
Thank you, Andy. It was great to talk to you. Lots of great content here. Thank you for the value you brought today.
And by the way, James is the guy that sets the schedule. So James, so you know what
got my email.
You know what your agenda is.
Yes, I do. So, all right. So we are about to be out of time, and I may be cut off on this, but I'm going to try to get it out. LoneStarREIA.net. That's LoneStarREIA.net. That has all of our upcoming events. It's got some of our past events, our YouTube channel. Everything that we do is at LoneStarREIA.net. And we definitely look forward to having you at our next meeting where we're going to have Ron LeGrand. We talked about it a little bit earlier, but last month Peter came in and we said, when Peter comes in, you got to stop what you're doing and make sure you listen. It's the same with Ron LeGrand. When he comes in, you got to stop and be there and listen. And it's going to be a fun, exciting, jam-packed meeting. We're going to do an all-day thing. We're going to have an afternoon session.
To the Massive Passive Show, where we teach investors how to get off the hamster wheel of transactional real estate. Hi, I'm Becky Fields, president of the Greater Houston RIA, and would like to invite you to join us at our regular monthly RIA meetings on the second Saturday morning each month. If you're in the San Antonio area, the Alamo RIA meets on the evening of the second Tuesday each month. Go to LoneStarREIA.org for more information. We would love to see you there. The Big Ten